Okay, we're reading Bloom today, starting at page 100, chapter 7. When her alarm went, Anaya slapped it silent, then dragged herself out of bed. The smell of coffee and toast lingered in the quiet house. Mom had just left, and Dad had gone even earlier. He'd woken her to say goodbye before setting off for the eco-reserves by boat with Amit. He'd sat on the edge of her bed with his warm earth smell. She told him she was going to miss him and told him to be safe. And he said he'd be back in a couple days and not to worry. She felt miserable when he left, but she drifted back to sleep anyways. On her way to the bathroom, Anaya glimpsed the latest crop of black grass, already 4 feet tall on the front lawn. "Hate you," she muttered. She dressed for school and went downstairs. She microwaved an apple, poured some almond milk into a bowl of gluten-free granola, and ate. "Don't worry," Dad had said. How could you not worry when terrible bioengineered plants were taking over the planet? She dropped her apple core into the compost and saw the bag was almost overflowing. Knotting it, she carried it out through the back door. The bins were against the wall and around the corner from the driveway. Anaya dumped the compost into the stinky green bin and clasped the lid. From the garbage bin next to it came a dry rustling sound, like something scratching inside. When the bin shuddered, Anaya stepped back. Probably a squirrel in there. When the sound came again, it was more like a snake's hiss. There weren't rattlesnakes on the island. She knew that much. She grabbed the rake leaning against the wall. With the tines, she carefully flipped open the lid. Grabbing the rake in both hands like a baseball bat, she retreated a few steps and waited for something to jump out. When nothing appeared, she whacked the side of the bin. After waiting a few more seconds, she stepped closer and peeked inside. In an explosion of hissing and whirling, a long, dark snake churned frantically against the sides, trapped. With a cry, Anaya kicked the bin. It toppled into the driveway, spilling a thick tangle onto the asphalt. It took her several seconds to realize it wasn't a snake. It was a black vine twisted into knots and still moving. Anaya brought down the rake's sharp teeth on it, severing the vine again and again until it stopped writhing. Panting, she shoved the tangled mess away from her. She bent closer and with a chill realized it looked a lot like the vine Dad had been growing on the farm. Same color, same little bulges along the stem, only this vine was much bigger and longer. Had it grown from the water puddled at the bottom of the garbage bin? From a careful distance, she bent to look inside. Light slanted through a crack in the plastic bottom. Anaya spotted the vine growing through it. Growing out or growing in? She walked around the outside of the bin and followed the vine down the driveway. It was very well camouflaged against the asphalt. She figured she must be tracing the vine to its source because it was getting thicker. Then she stopped and stared. It had grown from the bag of soil she'd taken from the school field. She'd left it propped against the wall because Dad said someone from the farm would swing by to pick it up. It looked a lot fatter than she remembered. A single thick vine had grown from the top of the bag and split into 3. One had grown down the driveway and into the garbage can, and the other two vines had climbed halfway up the wall of the house. Dangling from one of them was a kind of wrinkly sack. Anaya stared at it. It looked a bit like those bulges she and Dad had noticed at the lab, only much bigger. Right above the sack was a sprig of dark berries. They were small and smooth, and Anaya was startled by how she wanted to pluck one. She could almost feel the firmness of it against her tongue and imagine its taste singing through her mouth. She took a step closer, hand outstretched. A tiny bird landed on the vine, cocked its head at the berries. It took one in its beak and tugged. The berry didn't want to come off. The bird was perched atop the wrinkly sack. As Anaya watched, the bird plucked harder. The berry popped off, and at the exact same moment, the sack opened like a fleshy lips. Before the bird could spread its wings, it tumbled inside. Anaya made a small, startled grunt. The sack shook as the bird chirped and struggled, but the space was too narrow for it to open its wings. An odd, cloying smell reached Anaya's nostrils. Already the wet lips of the sack were closing. From inside, the bird's muffled shrieks suddenly stopped. A terrible smell of something rotting came from the sack. Anaya stepped back, breathing hard. Her gaze slithered back down the vine to the bag of soil. Heart pounding, Anaya opened the bag and looked inside. The soil trembled. A tiny hole like the one a clam makes in the sand appeared. Some grains of earth slipped into it. Anaya caught another whiff of the same sweet perfume, only stronger. Her mouth was dry with fear as she got the rake. Lightly, she tapped the soil with the end of the handle. The entire bag shook violently as a hole opened up in the middle. The handle of the rake fell deeper inside, and a fleshy mouth clamped shut around it. With a holler, Anaya pulled back on the rake. In a cascade of soil, the bag tipped over. A huge, wrinkly sack tumbled out. It was a dark purple and still clamped around the handle, trying desperately to devour it. Okay, we're going to stop there.